for everyday Americans, most particularly in Connecticut and Rhode Island. But it's not just Connecticut that has benefited from Revolution Wind. The supply chain for this project stretches across the country in red states and blue states. The construction of the first American-made offshore wind vessel provided hundreds of jobs. Where? Louisiana, Florida, Mississippi. Steel for the project sourced in Texas, Alabama, North Carolina, West Virginia. Offshore wind components were sourced and manufactured in Kansas and South Carolina. Just as our military construction and manufacturing often is sourced throughout the United States, in this case, all of America is helping to build Revolution Wind. And what's most galling about the administration's actions on Revolution Wind is they defy logic. 80% complete, all of it permitted, reviewed by the Department of Defense for National Security, as well as every other federal agency that had anything to do with it, any say at all, approved. And yet, in the 11th hour, the administration swooped down with a stop work order, citing, quote, national security concerns. And that's it, national security concerns. Well, that phrase is not a pass for everything the federal government wants to do. And so I demanded to know what they were, be provided with information in a classified briefing if necessary. I demanded it in a letter. I have yet to receive a satisfactory response. In fact, those concerns collapse under even the slightest scrutiny. A Department of Defense letter last year confirmed that, and I quote DOD here, construction of the Revolution Wind project would not have adverse impacts to DOD missions, end quote. No adverse impact. So the idea that somehow it might interfere with the movement of submarines from the Groton subbase, or maybe testing of submarines by electric boat, or some other national security or national defense need, no adverse impact to DOD mission. So these national security concerns quite clearly and outrageously were just a pretext, a flimsy excuse to continue this administration's all-out assault on offshore wind. The president said he doesn't like it. He's got something in for it. There's an animus. Who knows what the reason is? But thankfully, there is the law. Yes, a federal judge saw the administration's stop work order for what it was. Quote, the height of arbitrary and capricious. Now, federal judges do not often say that actions by the President of the United States are the height of arbitrary and capricious, nor do they lightly issue a preliminary injunction against that kind of stop work order. But this judge did, and it was based on the facts and the law. So work was allowed to resume on Revolution Wind. But let's be very clear-eyed. A lot of the harm was done. Work was stopped for almost a month with workers sidelined and progress halted to the tune of millions and millions of dollars. Not the way for the United States to do business. Not the way for the United States of America to advance economic growth or provide jobs or, equally important, make energy more affordable. If this administration can derail a fully approved energy project, whether it's natural gas pipelines or offshore wind farms, why would any developer, why would anyone invest in the United States? The credibility of the United States as a place to do business craters when projects can be derailed by the personal whim of a president, lawlessly and recklessly, as was done here, because this president doesn't like wind power. On the first day of the government shutdown, the Department of Energy canceled nearly $8 billion in clean energy funding for the whole country. It included $53 million for 12 projects in Connecticut, supporting lower energy prices, grid reliability, and American energy independence. It was done in a way that was as illogical, chaotic, and likely illegal as canceling Revolution Wind was. Again, a self-inflicted wound in every way by this president. And that is why he is the energy emergency. He created it in just months, it's not even a year. He declared it on his first day in office when there was no energy emergency. He is denying funding for innovative, promising projects. He's stopping nearly complete offshore wind projects. He's creating chaos. Makes America weaker. And so I urge my colleagues to vote to end the Trump energy emergency and recommit to finding real solutions to lowering energy costs for consumers and supporting American energy. And I'll just close with, again, referring to the Wall Street Journal's report of today on the International Energy Agency's conclusion about how our capacity for renewable energy will be cut by 50% as a result of Trump administration action. Quote, despite these shifts, Beijing continues to dominate the global renewable landscape, accounting for nearly 60% of capacity growth. The country is on track to meet its 2035 solar and wind power targets 5 years ahead of schedule. And we wonder why we are in danger of losing competitive advantage to China. Not because we lack the resources or the innovators or the workers. It is a failure of leadership, and it begins in the White House. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Mexico.
Mr. President, I have come to the Senate floor today to say what every New Mexican I know can easily tell you. Americans are reeling from an affordability crisis. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the price of groceries or rent or health care, everybody is stretched thin. They need help, and they need it now. And they need it from Congress and the President. But help is not what the President and his administration is delivering. Instead of working to lower health care and energy costs for American families, the President, his administration, and Republicans in Congress are choosing to drive those costs through the roof. They repealed energy tax credits, making it harder and more expensive to build and deliver energy to the grid. or even just to put solar panels on your own roof. They made it more expensive to make your home energy efficient. They imposed steep tariffs on steel and aluminum, driving up energy costs, infrastructure costs, and they are blocking energy from coming onto the grid. Now, if it feels chaotic, it's probably because it is. They are trying to sow chaos. While all of the numbers and projects and policies float around in the headlines, the real story, the real impact is in your budget. It's in your electric bill. According to the Energy Information Administration, residential electricity bills have already increased by almost 10% since President Trump took office. Household energy costs are expected to increase by another $170 annually by 2035, thanks to tax credit repeals and tariffs. And when it comes to the impacts on energy supply, it's the same story. As of August, Clean Power estimated that 25,000 megawatts, that's like 25 gigawatts. It's 25 nuclear power plants worth of energy. 2,500 megawatts, 25,000 megawatts of planned energy generation have been lost to projects being canceled or delayed since the president's election. That's more than enough power for 8.4 million homes in the United States. And I have bad news. It's about to get a whole lot worse. That's because President Trump is strangling the energy supply we badly need to drive down costs for everyone. From canceling energy projects, to withholding energy permits, to issuing illegal stop work orders on fully permitted generation projects. President Trump is waging a war on affordable, American-made energy. Most recently, that came in the form of canceled energy projects. Last week, the Trump administration unlawfully canceled nearly $8 billion in federal investments in 223 energy projects across 21 states, including 10 in the state of New Mexico. In Albuquerque, 2 projects by the same company were targeted. They have already had to make their first round of layoffs. If these awards are not restored in the next 45 days, they will be forced to lay off 50% of their workforce. These are people's lives we're talking about. And their local partners and collaborators who were anticipating growth opportunities because of the investment are being left in the cold. In Socorro, New Mexico, one technical university lost funding for 4 projects, $67 million in total. One project alone will impact 36 student researchers, all of whom now have to search for new funding or lose their research roles altogether. In Fruitland, New Mexico, another canceled project could have unlocked the key to keeping 600 people working. In Taos, New Mexico, more chaos is playing out. Funding for the Kit Carson Electric Cooperatives project to provide a battery energy storage system and microgrids to rural communities, canceled. This project would have directly improved reliability in Picaros Pueblo, the Taos Ski Valley, and El Rito West. Millions of dollars had already been expended, and countless New Mexicans were depending on that project. Now, they're all left wondering whether those funds will ever be reimbursed, or if New Mexicans will simply be left to pay the price and pick up the pieces. But it looks like cancellations may just be getting started. This morning, there was another article about rumors of even more cancellations coming. According to reports, this next round of cancellations could involve another 260 awards and $13 billion in revoked funds. And whether that happens or not, I can tell you without a doubt that the harm done from the first round will be irreparable. The cancellations will mean lost jobs for Americans, lost educational opportunities for our students. It will mean higher energy bills for households and businesses across this country. It will make it even harder for folks who are already struggling to make ends meet because of the affordability crisis instigated by this administration's tariffs and economic policy. It will mean less domestic manufacturing and innovation, all while diminishing America's competitive leadership globally. And it will make it harder for impacted developers and utilities to secure their financing. That's not just true for the now canceled projects, but also for any future opportunities that depend on the stability of things like government permits and regulatory structure, investments, grants, because that's another casualty of this administration's war on American-made affordable energy, the reliability of the permitting process. In January, on his first day in office, President Trump paused all new leasing and permitting of wind energy projects on public lands. In February, the Army Corps of Engineers singled out and delayed 168 energy projects on private land. In March, the Environmental Protection Agency withdrew the permit for Atlantic Shores offshore wind. In April, the Department of Interior imposed a stop work order on the Empire Wind 1 project. In July, the Interior Department released a directive requiring the Secretary's personal review and approval of every wind and solar energy project on public lands, a move that will undoubtedly cause long delays. In August, the Department of Interior issued an illegal stop work order on Revolution Wind's offshore wind project, a project that was already 80% done. It was fully permitted, and it was 80% complete, and they told people to go home. They said, your job doesn't matter. In September, the Trump administration asked a court to cancel the permit on a wind farm off Ocean City, Maryland. It's a project that would generate 2.2 gigawatts of energy, enough to power 718,000 homes, and just as importantly, support almost 2,700 jobs every year over the next 7 years. And it's just among the ones that have actually been in the news. I've heard from companies across the nation about delays and difficulties getting their projects permitted. So let's be clear, spending your time canceling ready-to-go energy projects isn't doing anything to address the energy crisis. Instead of fixing any of this, President Trump's executive order makes it worse. Here's what his order actually does. Hikes energy costs for millions of Americans by doubling down on expensive fossil fuels when it makes no economic sense. Sends hundreds of thousands of American jobs overseas as other countries continue to develop their next-generation energy sources. Decreases our American-made domestic energy supplies, forces us to be more reliant on foreign energy sources, and erodes our economic competitiveness and energy dominance. It does not have to be this way. The last time we faced an energy crisis in the United States, it was the 1970s. Energy prices were skyrocketing because of the 1973 oil crisis, when barrels of oil, then our most in-demand energy source, quadrupled in price. U.S. energy production could not meet domestic demand, and the country saw blackouts and brownouts. With an energy crisis on its hands, Congress actually acted. In a bipartisan effort, Congress created the Department of Energy. It funded significant research around the country to explore new ways to power things: solar, geothermal, nuclear, including the Energy Research and Development Administration. And it worked on advancing transmission systems to create more competitive energy markets, saving money for everyone. Congress met the moment and defined our energy future for decades to come. As part of that, in 1976, construction began on a 5-megawatt thermal solar test facility at the Energy Research and Development Administration Sandia Laboratories in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Before it was even complete, the facility became the largest operational solar installation in the world. This solar test facility was just one small example of the huge bipartisan effort to meet that moment. Today, we're at a similar crossroads. Demand for new technology has once again outpaced available power reserves. Infrastructure is aging. Across the country, utility prices are rising as demand for energy rises too. Again, Congress can meet this moment. We cannot do that by doubling down on expensive fossil energy or generation sources that take 5, 6, 7, even 10 years to build. If you order a gas turbine today, it would take you 5 to 7 years just to receive it. And its price is going through the roof because of the tariffs that the president have put on things like aluminum and steel. That's not going to solve the rising costs we're dealing with right now. In contrast, solar, wind, batteries, these are modular, faster to permit, easier to construct with fewer supply chain restraints. And that's especially true when they are, or were, already permitted. We're shovels in the ground, workers ready to build. Instead of accepting this reality, President Trump and congressional Republicans are flailing, and it's leaving everyday Americans to shoulder the costs. By eliminating energy sources instead of adding more, this administration is raising your energy prices, raising your electricity bill, not lowering it. The impacts are real and they're far-reaching. For many households, the choice to pay hundreds more in energy costs means the choice to not pay for other things: groceries, doctor's bills, school supplies. It's not a choice you should have to make. You shouldn't be a pawn in President Trump's political games. Senator Kaine and I introduced Senate Joint Resolution 71 to put an end to Trump's war on American-made affordable energy, to bring down costs for American families, and to save jobs that American families rely on, to call out this administration for its chaos and its incompetence, and the fact that it doesn't seem to care about the impacts on everyday Americans. And so I call on all of my colleagues here in the Senate to join us. Vote yes on Senate Joint Resolution 71. Do not make American families pay the price for Trump's war on affordable American energy.
President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, thank you very much. I'm here at the floor today to talk about President Trump's completely fake energy emergency, which is nothing more than a pretext to move money from the pockets of Americans to his big fossil fuel mega donors. You may remember that he had a meeting with big fossil fuel donors and asked for $1 billion in campaign money in return for giving them whatever they want. Well, I don't know that he got $1 billion, but he got hundreds of millions, and sure enough, he's giving them everything that they want. But the side effect of the fossil fuel industry having ownership and control over the Trump administration and all of its policies and decisions is that people's electricity rates are going to go up. They're already going up, and they're going to go up more. This graph shows how voters are feeling about electricity prices, and it says most voters are feeling some pain from electricity prices. This is already, it is going to get worse. Already, 26% of Americans say it has a lot of impact on their lives. 31% say a decent amount of impact on their lives. Another 30, a little bit. Only 9% say none at all. It's cool. Electric prices are good with me. So that's a pretty big hit. Even among Republicans, 25% say it hits them a lot. 29% say it hits them a decent amount, and 32% say it hits them a little bit. Only 11 say none at all, electric prices are cool. So electric prices are going up, and they're going up big time, and they're going up for deliberate reasons. The one deliberate reason has to do with the AI, crypto, tech bros, data centers problem. As you know, the data center crypto people gave a lot of money to Donald Trump. They're big political donors. They're getting pretty much everything they want from this administration. In return, they're making the Trump family hugely rich in crypto billions. But in the meantime, they are driving people's electric prices up. And they're doing so this way. This is an interesting graph. This shows places where electric bills are going down. Blue means the prices are going down. And what's measured here is how far away you are from a data center. So here is 0 to about 25 miles away from a data center. So if you live between 0 and 25 miles from a data center, if you're in the range of the electric utility that has to serve that data center when it drops in with its huge electric load, with its huge water demand, with all the traffic and pollution and everything else that it brings, you see very, very little in the way of cost decreases. In fact, if you compare it to places that are further and further away, this is about 225 miles away from a data center, you can see that the electric prices going down happens much more the further away you are from a data center. This shows the opposite. This shows the places where electric prices are soaring. The price increases, and it's the same deal. This is how far away you are from a data center. If you're from 0 to 25 miles away, compare that to this. The comparison between your electricity price increases if you're near a data center versus your electricity price decreases if you're near a data center couldn't be more clear. This is me with a gold marker marking off the difference. That's not in the original graph, but it focuses your attention on how, when you're near a data center, you're less likely to have lower electric prices. You can see how low it is compared to the further away you get. But if you're near a data center, the nearer you are to a data center, the higher your electric prices go. And if you're really near one, if you're in this block here of like within 25 miles, your electric prices are skyrocketing. And that is not a mistake. That is being done on purpose because the Trump administration won't make these big donors who are in crypto world and data center world bring their own clean energy or provide their own clean water, for that matter, to the grid. So what they do is they arrive, they dump a huge amount of demand into the existing grid, and that means that new and more expensive units have to come online. And as those new and more expensive units have to come online, the price goes up and up and up, because in almost every grid, it's the most expensive unit running at any minute that sets the price for the entire grid in that minute. So if you can drive up demand, you drive up these huge, inefficient, polluting, expensive power plants, and the price goes through the roof. That is precisely why you are seeing this huge increase in cost when you're near a data center, and almost impossible to find a decrease in cost if you're near a data center. So problem one, energy emergency one, caused by the Trump administration to pay off its big crypto donors, is this. It's the data center bomb falling on regular electric utility ratepayers who suddenly watch their bills skyrocket. Here's the other bomb. This is the plot in the Trump administration for the sake of their big fossil fuel donors to try to hamper and hinder and injure clean energy. They have a big lie, which is to say that clean energy is more expensive. It's clean energy that's driving costs on the grid. Oh my gosh, this expensive clean energy. Wrong. That just isn't true. That's a complete fabrication. And this graph shows the Texas grid. So this is an illustration of how that plays out. Texas has a unique grid. It's unique to Texas. It doesn't interact with the other grids the way most of the grids do. They have interconnections and they can interact with each other. Texas is isolated. That's why that big freeze in Texas that shut down all the power and caused people to freeze, that took place because that grid was unified and they couldn't call in power from elsewhere. So this graph does two things. It takes a look at 1 month, August, back in 2018, and it looks at what power cost at different levels of demand on the grid. So in 2018, if you had 40 gigawatts of demand, then you were paying about 20 cents per megawatt hour. And it stayed about the same until demand got bigger. You got up to 50 megawatts, you get up to 60 megawatts, and then it starts to spike here. And it hits $75 per megawatt hour once it approaches 70 gigawatts of load. So what's important here is the comparison. In 2018, these were the prices in August for that increment of load during August. This, the yellow graph, is 2024, 6 years later. What happened to the Texas grid between 2018 and 2024? What happened to the Texas grid between 2018 and 2024 is that huge amounts of clean energy came onto the grid. In fact, last year, 95% of the new power coming on the United States grid was clean energy. It was solar, it was wind, and it was battery. 95%. So between 2018 and 2024, you see this move in the Texas grid. And look what happens. Pick, let's say, 60 megawatts of load at a given moment in August of 2024. You paid $20 per megawatt hour. For the exact same circumstance, 6 years earlier, you would have paid 35, maybe $40. $20, twice as much, basically. The reason the costs went down from 2018 to 2024 was new, inexpensive, clean energy coming on the grid. Why is it inexpensive? It's inexpensive because wind is free. It's inexpensive because solar is free. Once you've built the infrastructure to capture the solar rays, once you've built the infrastructure to capture the wind flowing by, God made those resources free. A fossil fuel plant, you still have to build it, but once you've built it, you've got to bring in the fossil fuel, pipe in the fossil fuel, burn the fossil fuel. It's expensive. And so almost always the unit that is setting the price on the grid for electricity is a fossil fuel unit, because they're the most expensive ones, so they set the price for the whole grid. And you can see the difference. Let's go to, let's call this 68 megawatts of load, just so we're comparing these 2 points. Back in 2018, that would have been a $75 per megawatt hour cost. $75, and yet here it's 25. It's a third the cost on the Texas grid because all that clean energy came on. And you got to get way out here before the price spikes when those polluting, expensive fossil fuel plants have to come on at 80 plus megawatts of load to even begin to match the prices from 6 years earlier. Clean wind and solar power save consumers money. So when the Trump administration says it's going to inhibit, hinder, injure clean energy development, that's like backing this back out of the grid. Now it starts to look more like 2018. Now, if you're buying electricity at this level of grid load, you're paying 3 times as much. 3 times as much. And this is deliberate. You don't think the Trump people don't understand this? They know perfectly well. And here's the deal. The extra 2/3 of your cost here that comes out of your pocket if you're in Texas, because the clean energy isn't there lowering the costs, that comes out of your pocket. Where does it go? Where does it go? I'll tell you where it goes. It goes to the fossil fuel units that had to get called up to meet that amount of load. The most expensive units on the grid have to be called up to meet that load, and they drive the price up. So if you're a fossil fuel billionaire and you own a bunch of polluting power plants, sometimes, particularly with clean energy around, they're sitting idle. They're not being called up. They're too expensive to be called up because clean energy is in there beating them. So if you own those plants, you want to go and talk to the Trump administration and say, hey, knock that clean energy out of the grid. I want my polluting, expensive plant to run again because that's money in my pocket. And if you're selling that plant the fossil fuel, you go to the Trump administration and you say, hey, clobber those clean energy guys. I gave you good money. Clobber those clean energy guys. And now I get to sell all that fossil fuel to burn to run those expensive plants. So the people that make a bundle out of knocking down clean energy are the fossil fuel people who cut that deal for hundreds of millions of dollars to Trump's campaign in return for him clobbering their rivals by making it difficult to develop clean energy projects. And what they don't want you to know is that this is on purpose and that this is for fossil fuel. They don't want you to know how this works. They don't want you to know about how the most expensive units get called up as demand grows, that when you take out the clean energy, even more expensive units get called up, that those are the polluting fossil fuel units that tend to set the price. It is a massive transfer of money from the pockets of ratepayers whose electric utility rates go up to the fossil fuel industry in return for all the political money they gave Donald Trump. That's the deal. It is a huge transfer of wealth from ratepayers to big fossil fuel donors. And what they're hoping is that you won't know this. They're hoping you'll blame it on the electric utility that sends you the bill. They're hoping that you won't notice that behind that soaring electric utility bill is manipulation of the grid to knock out clean energy, to drive up prices. And if that's not bad enough, what you then find out is that the climate consequences of all that fossil fuel pollution start coming home to roost as well. We did some work on this in the Budget Committee. I'll use 3 quick slides. These are places where non-renewal rates for homeowners insurance are increasing. What is the non-renewal rate, you may ask, for homeowners insurance? That is how often the insurance company says to you, their longtime customer, hey, thanks for being my longtime customer, but you're fired now. I don't want your property. I can't insure it. There's too much climate risk. So if you look at where it's really spiking, where'd you guess? Florida. Florida. Because they have huge risk from flooding, sea level rise, hurricanes and storms. Their whole insurance market is melting down. Where else? Out west, where wildfires are making properties uninsurable. Tell you what, if you know somebody in Florida, ask them about their home insurance. Just do that for me. If you know somebody who lives in Florida, ask them about their home insurance. You will hear an earful from them. And it's not just getting shot down, it's also that insurance rates are going up. And again, look where, along these coastal areas, along these wildfire-prone areas. So what the Trump administration is doing to reward its big fossil fuel mega donors isn't just to transfer money from your pockets to the big donors through electric utility rates. It's not just done to transfer money from your pockets to their big crypto donors by letting them irresponsibly just dump their demand on the grid. They're also breaking down the home insurance market so that not only are the insurers saying to people, I can't insure you any longer, your climate risk is too great, but they're also saying, wow, if I'm going to insure you, we got to really raise our rates. And so these are premium increases, 100%, 200%, 300%. You can find in these areas. In Florida, the average homeowner's insurance is $14,000. If you go to Miami-Dade, it's $21,000 for homeowner's insurance. You go to Louisiana here, it's $11,000. You got people who try to buy a home in these places, and they get the deal together, they get the mortgage together, they show the realtor that they can make the nut on the mortgage, and then they try to get insurance to close the deal, and they can't get insurance, and the deal falls apart. There are young families who can't buy homes because of the skyrocketing prices or because the insurers won't insure them because it's too dangerous. And guess what that does? Where does that land? That lands in home values declining. This is not just me saying this. The chief economist for Freddie Mac, the huge mortgage company, predicts that climate risk makes homeowners insurance unavailable. And when you can't get homeowners insurance, what can you also not get on your property? You can't get a mortgage. And if you're a Palm Beach billionaire swapping mansions with other billionaires, great, you can pay cash. But for regular families who bought their home with a mortgage, when they need to sell it, they need to find somebody who can buy it with a mortgage 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100. So when you can't get a mortgage, what happens to that piece of property? When the property is uninsurable and unmortgageable, its value goes down. And that's why the chief economist for Freddie Mac, the mortgage company, predicted the cascade from climate risk to uninsurability to no mortgages to a what he called coastal property values crash that could lead to a recession like 2008. I remember 2008. It was ugly. I do not want to go there again. But here, you see places in which home values are predicted to change. Along the coast here, where there's all the coastal risk, here where there's big wildfire risk. And guess what? If you look at the graph, it goes from no change, that's the tan, that's most of it, all the way to, how about that one? You can't read it, so I'll tell you what it says. Minus 100%. Total wipeout of your home's value because it's uninsurable and unmortgageable. That's the future we're looking at. This is the energy emergency. This is the real energy emergency, and it's an energy emergency that is caused by fossil fuel pollution. And the immediate circumstance also comes through the electric utility bills as you put less and less clean energy into the grid and make more and more expensive fossil fuels, set the price, and at the same time you're selling out to the crypto guys to let them come in irresponsibly, dump their demand on your grid, and supply-demand shows the prices spike. So if you want to know what the real emergency is the Trump administration has sold out to the crypto industry, it has sold out to the fossil fuel industry, it denies climate change, it pretends it's a hoax. Literally, the president has said that in like words. And that climate change problem is destroying home insurance markets, mortgage markets, and property values, and it has already begun. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from California.
Mr. President, I rise today to bring before the Senate a resolution concerning one of our most serious constitutional responsibilities, whether the United States should engage in armed conflict against a particular adversary. The Constitution clearly and intentionally places the power to declare war in the hands of this body, the Congress, not with the President or the executive branch. Our Constitution's framers, having just endured a war and having paid the toll that war always takes, wanted to ensure that our newly independent nation would see the representatives of the people make the decision whether and when to put American lives on the line. In 1798, James Madison wrote to Thomas Jefferson about the danger of leaving that power in the hands of an executive. He said, "The Constitution supposes what the history of all governments demonstrates, that the executive is the branch of power most interested in war and most prone to it. Having accordingly, with studied care, vested the question of war in the legislature." For the past month, Congress's power to authorize or refuse to authorize the use of power has been usurped by the executive. This administration has carried out at least 4 military strikes against vessels that it asserts have ties to drug trafficking organizations. These strikes were not authorized by Congress. Congress has not been shown the evidence of who exactly was on board these ships, whether they were all headed to the United States or some other destination, or whether they posed an imminent danger of attack on the United States. Such strikes are not legal, and they are not made legal or constitutional by the claim, correctly or incorrectly, with or without evidence, that some or all of the occupants of these boats belong to a list of organizations kept secret by the administration. Being put on a list by the executive branch does not deprive Congress of its vital role in approving the use of force. But such a list, kept hidden from the American people, if used as a justification, may drag our nation into an unintended war. If it were as simple for a president, any president, to claim that war power for himself by placing an individual or a group of individuals on a list, let alone one held in secret, there would be no limiting principle to the executive's use of force, no limits whatsoever, and that is deeply inconsistent with the intent of our framers and the desire of the American people to be kept out of unnecessary military conflicts. Indeed, the President has confirmed that he does not see a limit. He saw targets at sea, and now he sees potential targets on land. Now, I know that the word unprecedented gets used so much these days that perhaps it's lost some of its value. But we need to put in context just how far from normal these strikes are. For perhaps the first time in our history, a president of the United States ordered the U.S. military to use lethal force against individuals who posed no imminent threat of attack and who could have been stopped thousands of miles from our shore had we interdicted and arrested those on board, just as they routinely are by our Coast Guard. Instead, the U.S. military used lethal force on 4 separate occasions, killing everyone on board. And despite this breathtaking departure from more than 2 centuries of law and practice, we still know almost nothing about these strikes, some taking place as far as 2,700 miles away. It may be there were narcotics traffickers on board some or all of these vessels. It may also be that some of these boats were being used for human trafficking, and the victims of that offense were killed along with the perpetrators. Or if not on one of the first 4 ships destroyed, then perhaps on the next one. The lack of detail concerning these strikes is telling. We have learned of these strikes through social media posts from the President, the Secretary of Defense, and from the press. In fact, administration officials have offered differing accounts of where these vessels were heading. Media reports have suggested, without rebuttal from the administration, that the first vessel to be struck had turned around prior to being hit. The Secretary of State originally claimed that one of the boats wasn't even heading to the United States. Given our Coast Guard presence in the region with a sizable Navy deployment and expansive intelligence resources, U.S. personnel could have boarded all of these vessels, detained those on board, seized any drugs or cash, and gathered additional information about ties to drug trafficking organizations, just as they normally do. Secretary of State Rubio even acknowledged publicly that this could have been done, but said that the president wanted to send a message by killing all those on board. Now, we all agree that the scourge of drugs is real and that scores of Americans die from such poison every year. We are all committed on both sides of the aisle to battling the importation of illegal drugs, even as we work to beat back addiction here at home. But we are also committed to our Constitution, to a system of checks and balances that wisely place the power to make war in our hands, not an executive that may grow too fond of using it. That is why Senator Kaine and I have introduced a resolution to direct the president to stop engaging in armed strikes against these vessels or the country from which they emanate without the explicit authorization of Congress. And we are here today to ask our colleagues to join us in this nonpartisan vote, in this affirmation of Congress's authority to declare war or to refuse to declare it, to authorize force or to refuse to authorize it. We have been precise and deliberate with crafting it. This resolution does not affect the United States' ability to target terrorist groups covered by Congress's existing authorizations to use military force, including al-Qaeda, ISIS, or its affiliates and offshoots, or address real threats posed by other groups like the Houthis. It also in no way limits the United States' ability to defend our own citizens and interests or to come to the collective defense, self-defense of our allies and our partners. It comes down to this. The President has used our military to strike unknown targets on at least 4 occasions, and he is promising more. With at least 21 people dead and more killing on the way, with the President telling us that strikes on land-based targets may be next, we ask you to join us and reassert Congress's vital control over the war power. And with that, Mr. President, I yield.
Mr. President.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today in support of Senators Schiff and Kane's resolution regarding war powers. This resolution would just say very simply that if the Trump administration wants to be at war against a terrorist organization, they should come to Congress, notify us, and seek our approval. Currently, the administration is waging a secret war against a secret list of unnamed groups that they will not tell us about. There's been 4 lethal strikes against boats in the Caribbean. The administration wrote this body a letter about what they were doing in September. They said they consider themselves to be in, quote, a non-international armed conflict. That means a war against a secret list of, quote, designated terrorist organizations. I received a briefing last week on the administration's strikes in the Caribbean. During that briefing, members of the Senate Armed Services Committee from both sides of the aisle asked a Senate-confirmed official whether the Department of Defense could produce a list of the organizations that are now considered terrorists by the United States. They said they could not provide that list. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a CIA officer. I'm a former Pentagon official. I did 3 tours in Iraq armed alongside the military. I participated in targeting of terrorist groups. And I actually have no real problem going against cartels, given what they have done in inserting drugs in our community, the death of so many Americans. But as a nation, I think we should have as a basic principle that you can't have a secret list of terrorist organizations that the American public and certainly the U.S. Congress don't get to even know the names of. The problem for me is that this is unprecedented. You know, during the global war on terror, which is kind of my era, it was very clear. Terrorist organizations would be notified. If we wanted to declare a new terrorist organization, it would be notified to Congress. And then our intelligence community, the military, law enforcement would spin up to go after information about that group and prosecute, targeting against that group. But that is not what's going on today. And we will not understand the apparently dozens of terrorist organizations that we have now named until we understand their names. Now, this is important in the foreign context, right? This is unprecedented in terms of what we've done against foreign adversaries, foreign terrorist organizations. But what I want to draw people's attention to is the implication for what is happening inside our own country. In September, also last month, the Trump administration put out a new executive order about domestic terrorist organizations. They said that they were going to, again, make secret lists of terrorist groups inside the United States and send the full force of the U.S. government against those terrorist organizations. They are not telling anyone the name of these organizations, but they are authorizing law enforcement and the intelligence community to double down and come up with that list. This is a problem because the Trump administration defined in that document a terrorist organization or domestic terrorism incredibly broadly. It suggests that any group that talks about anti-Christian values, views they don't like on migration or race, differing views on the role of the family, religion, or morality could all be grounds for labeling an organization domestic terrorists. if this administration is not telling us who's on their secret designated terrorist list for groups in the Caribbean, they're definitely not going to tell us who's on their list of domestic terrorist organizations. We saw, to start us off, the Attorney General down in Texas put out publicly that he is now going to launch a campaign against domestic terrorist organizations in his own state. So it has begun. Meanwhile, we know what's going on in some of our American cities. Trump said that he would invoke potentially the Insurrection Act of 1807. He has made more than 800 of our military generals fly in from across the world and talk about going after the enemy from within, his words, and making American towns and cities their training grounds for the military. This is important, and I think every American should understand what it means if the President of the United States follows through with what he said and says that he's now invoking the Insurrection Act. That means certain city, the violence has gotten to a level of an insurrection, and it means that the U.S. military can now be used as law enforcement in our cities. It means the U.S. military can raid, they can arrest, they can detain. You can easily see a world where the President of the United States labels protest groups terrorists, doesn't tell anyone, creates an excuse to unilaterally use the military inside our cities, similar to the way he's used them in the Caribbean. And just to be clear, this is straight out of an authoritarian playbook, right? Where the president gets to play judge, jury, and executioner. This time, instead of stopping drug traffickers, it will be stopping Americans, potentially from exercising their right to freedom of speech. This is not theoretical, using the U.S. military in our streets. This is not something that the president hasn't already thought about. We know that in the first Trump administration, the president called up his Secretary of Defense, his chairman of the Joint Chiefs, because he was upset about protests that were going on in front of the White House. Mark Esper was the Secretary of Defense. He wrote about this in his book called A Sacred Oath, and he talked about some of the things that President Trump asked him to do. Trump wanted him to send in not the National Guard, but the 82nd Airborne, an active duty military unit, one of our most elite, large units, to quell protests here in Washington, D.C. He asked for them to be moved into the city, and when the back and forth happened with former Secretary Esper, President Trump asked him point blank, "Can't you just shoot them in the legs or something?" I want to just flag for everybody that we are seeing a repeat of that story, but in exponentially more gruesome detail play out right now. The president is looking for an excuse to send in the U.S. military into our streets, to deploy the U.S. military against his own people, to prompt confrontation, and to hope that that confrontation justifies even more military force and military control. This is a well-worn authoritarian playbook. It's one that quite literally the United States of America was founded on rejecting. The idea that the British soldiers, when they occupied American cities, abused American citizens to the point where Americans turned against them. I'm a former CIA officer, a former Pentagon official. I've worked alongside the military my entire life. I cannot stomach the idea that the American people would fear the uniformed military that have given their lives to protect them for so many years. But all of us in this chamber, and certainly those of us who have served in the past, swore an oath to the Constitution, not to a king, not to a party, not to any one person. Nobody gets to rewrite the Constitution, not a president, not an advisor, no one. If the president wants to use force abroad or at home, he needs to come to this body and explain it publicly to the American public. Thank you, and with that, I yield back.
The senator from Arkansas.
Incredibly, the Democrats are here to condemn President Trump's recent strikes against narco-terrorists operating in our backyard. Maybe they want to distract from the Schumer shutdown. by tying the president's hands and siding with narco-terrorists who have the blood of hundreds of thousands of Americans on their hands. Whatever the reason, this would be foolhardy. If you think I'm exaggerating here, let me remind you of the kind of depraved savages we're dealing with. Recall the Trinidad gang member who tried to rape 22-year-old Laken Riley while she was out for a jog on a college campus. After Laken fought back, this savage smashed her head with a rock and strangled her to death. Also recall the two Trinidad gang members who, after being released into our country by Joe Biden, raped and murdered 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungare. These animals threw this innocent little girl's body off a bridge. Finally, consider the recent arrest of the Trinidad gang leader who kidnapped 3 women and shot them in the back of the head in an alley in Chicago. Only one survived to call for help. These are the sort of horrific acts of violence that narco-terrorists commit against Americans. And of course, these narco-terrorists, many affiliated with Trinidad, also flood our country with dangerous drugs that have taken the lives of tens of thousands of Americans every year, after year, after year. They target every state in our union with their poison. This is among the many reasons why President Trump was well within his constitutional authority to take action against these narco-terrorists that put American lives at risk. These recent strikes fulfilled President Trump's constitutional duty to protect Americans as their elected commander-in-chief. And this should come as no surprise. President Trump stated very clearly and repeatedly during the campaign that he would attack these cartels if necessary. This is simply him keeping his word to the American people. Also, the president's strikes were lawfully sound and extremely limited. Because they've been going on for less than 60 days, they don't even fall within the War Powers Resolution threshold. I would also note that presidential action like this is hardly unheard of or unique. For context, as of the mid-20th century, scholars identified more than 100 military deployments or actions that lacked express prior congressional authorization. I could go back to the beginning of the Republic with the Barbary pirates off the coast of North Africa. But there's another example, much closer in time, and, for that matter, on the border. That would be President George H.W. Bush's decision to invade and topple the government of Panama in 1989 without prior congressional approval. He ordered 12,000 American troops into that country. We toppled Panama's illegitimate regime, we apprehended the country's dictator, and he spent the rest of his life in foreign custody. Now, let's compare these two cases. In both cases, you have the leader of a country that is indicted by the United States courts for drug trafficking. In both cases, that leader is not recognized by the United States government as the legitimate leader of his country. I'd say the comparison ends there because the case is much stronger here than it was in 1989. Maduro also has, I think, a $50 million reward on his head from our government. Maduro is associated with a designated foreign terrorist organization. Noriega didn't have a reward. Noriega wasn't associated with a designated foreign terrorist organization. Maduro is in league with China, Russia, Iran, Cuba. Noriega was not. Yet, George Bush invaded Panama and overthrew its government. I don't hear many Democrats in retrospect saying that this was an unwise action or made our country less safe. And somehow Donald Trump is doing those things merely by striking a few boats of drug traffickers in international waters? Now, even if you had misgivings about these strikes, even maybe if you were a Democrat in Congress in 1989, as some of our colleagues were, and you condemned President Bush for taking action to defend our country, I would still point out that the resolution before us is overbroad. The resolution prevents the President from taking offensive action against any foreign terrorist organization designated on or after February 20th of this year. This includes the Iranian-backed Houthi terrorists in Yemen. It appears our Democratic friends have forgotten that the Houthis are responsible for at least 150 attacks against the United States and allied naval and commercial ships, which have killed at least 3 people. These terrorists have also targeted our friends in Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, mostly civilians for that matter. So if the Democrats had their way, President Trump would not be able to, for example, strike a secret meeting of senior Houthi leaders. Wouldn't be able to strike imminent attacks on our friends in countries like Israel, Saudi Arabia, or United Arab Emirates. I think we should all agree that we want our president, when terrorists are gathered together, the purpose of planning attacks against American civilians, our troops, or our friends abroad, to have the authority necessary to take action. Now, the Democrats claim, oh, there's a carve-out in our resolution. Oh, we have a saving clause. We have a rule of construction that says our troops can defend themselves. Once again, they're misleading the American people. I invite you to read it closely. It may allow our sailors to defend themselves if these Houthi terrorists shoot a missile or a drone directly at their ship, but it absolutely ties the president's hands if, for instance, we have intelligence about a senior meeting of Houthi terrorist leaders. It absolutely ties the president's hands from protecting our friends in places like Jerusalem and Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. There's no question about that. It's the black letter of the resolution. It only goes for about 3 lines. I'd invite anyone to read it, and you'll understand that the Democrats are once again dissembling. No reasonable person denies the authority of the president to strike a terrorist threat on foreign soil. Yet the Democrats are here tonight questioning the president's authority to do the exact same thing in our own backyard, in international waters, no less, not even foreign territory. This is a dangerous double standard. Therefore, Mr. President, I encourage my colleagues to vote no on this resolution and to get back to the more pressing business of reopening our government. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President, let me take this
Senator
opportunity.
from California.
Thank you. Let me take this opportunity to address some of the remarks of my colleague, who has, I think, rightly pointed out the horrors of drug trafficking and those that are engaged in that poisonous, deadly trade. I agree with that. We should do everything we can to fight back against those who are trying to traffic that poison into this country. But here's the thing, and I agree with him about the murderous dictator that is Maduro. But here's the thing. If my colleagues in this Congress want to go to war with Venezuela, if they want to use military force to bring about regime change in Venezuela, or if they want to wage a literal war using the military and armed force to blow up traffickers, then they need to come to Congress and seek an authorization to use military force for that purpose, because our Constitution is clear. There are essentially 3 circumstances in which we can constitutionally use force. One is if the Congress declares war. We have not declared war on Venezuela. We have not declared a literal fighting war using military troops either. Or we authorize the use of military force. We have not done so. Now, the third circumstance in which a president is authorized to use force is in the event of imminent threat of attack from our adversaries. And that is simply not the circumstance here. Instead, what the administration seems to be relying on is a claim that it has the power somehow to put organizations on a list and go after them wherever they may be without the approval of Congress. That's what this resolution is about. Now, my colleague also made an argument about the Houthis. Nothing in this resolution affects the ability to defend ourselves from the Houthis as necessary. The president and the former presidents who have taken action against the Houthis have not done so on the basis of the Houthis being added to some list. Being added to a list, even a foreign terrorist organization list, empowers an administration to put sanctions on that organization, but being placed on a list by the executive does not give any greater authority to use armed force against an organization. The basis in which this president and previous presidents have used force against the Houthis is the Houthis have attacked us. And if the Houthis attack us again, the president will have the Article 2 power to defend ourselves. And nothing in this resolution touches that in any way, shape, or form. But let me just underscore the perils of what we're discussing today. Now, this is an article that just came out. I don't have the chance to vet it. Colombian president claims U.S. bombed Colombian boat in strike off Venezuela. So I don't know whether we have now struck a Colombian ship or what the circumstances were or who was on board, and that's exactly the problem. That's exactly the problem. Now, maybe this is real and maybe it isn't. But the fact that we don't know, the fact that the executive asserts the authority to blow up ships without coming to Congress for the authorization of that kind of force could invariably lead to mistakes, could also lead inadvertently to war with another country. This resolution says, you want to use force against narco-terrorists by blowing up ships, come to Congress for an authorization. Because at this point, you don't have it. If there's an imminent threat of attack, you have all the authority you need under Article 2. But if you want to engage in a war with Venezuela or regime change with Maduro and you want to use military force to do it, you need to come to Congress for an authorization. There being none, these strikes are unconstitutional and unlawful, and I would urge my colleagues to join Senator Kaine and myself in supporting this resolution. I yield, Mr. President.
The senator from Idaho.
Mr. President, we're here today to talk about a resolution put forth by the Democrats that is very, very not well taken. We're all aware in this body that on September 4th, President Trump notified Congress of his initial strike against narco-terrorists who were bringing deadly and illegal drugs into this country, the first of 4 such strikes. Now, my colleague just referred to the fact that the president can, if there's an imminent attack on our country, that they can strike. This wasn't an imminent attack. This was an actual attack. It was in progress. It was going on. People were attacking our country by bringing in poisonous substances to deposit into our country that would have killed Americans all over America, including your constituents. Fortunately, most of those drugs are now at the bottom of the ocean. Had that not happened, I guarantee you there would have been hundreds, maybe thousands of people in this country that would have been killed with the tremendous amount of drugs that were being brought in. The facts of that are obviously well-known, well-reported, and if you want to see more, certainly available in the Intelligence Committee. The people carrying those drugs were terrorists, plain and simple. They were trafficking drugs that finance a designated foreign terrorist organization. These strikes were fully compliant and fully justified under the president's Article 2 constitutional authority, and not only authority, but duty as commander-in-chief of our armed forces to defend this country. And he took an oath to do so. So why are we here today? we're looking at a resolution saying that he can't do this anymore. This is nonsense. It is unreasonable. It's why the American people look at Congress and say, are you people crazy? You got the President of the United States trying to do something about this terrible scourge that's going on in America, and you in Congress are saying, don't be doing that anymore unless you come here and ask us for permission to do it. So, these actions are political, pure and simple. These actions here are political. This was a good decision on the part of the President, and the President acted legally. So, what are my Democrat friends doing here? They're putting forth this joint resolution number 83 to stop the President from acting in the way he has just acted to stop these drugs from coming into the country. So let's look at what it says. Let's look at the actual language. Congress hereby directs the President of the United States to terminate the use of the United States Armed Forces for hostilities against any organization designated on or after February 20th, 2025, his date of inauguration, as a foreign terrorist organization or specifically designated global terrorist, any state, any states in which these entities operate, or any non-state organizations engaged in the promotion, trafficking, and distribution of illegal drugs. You're telling the President to stop using this against organizations and people who are trafficking drugs and for distribution and on the way to the United States. And it goes on to say that he can't do this unless explicitly authorized by a declaration of war or specific authorization for use of military force by this organization. How long do you think it'd take him to get that? Those drugs not only would have been delivered to the United States, they would have not only been distributed in the United States, there would be dead Americans, and we'd still be here yakking about it. So, even if this passed, and it's not going to, but if it did pass, he's not going to obey this order. He can't obey this order. He took an oath to defend this country. When he sees an attack like this coming, an attack of drugs or explosives or anything else that's going to kill Americans, he not only has the authority to do something about it, he has the duty to do something about it. We should have a resolution out here not condemning what he did and telling him, don't do this anymore. We should have a resolution out here thanking him for the hundreds, probably thousands of lives that he saved with these 4 attacks, including constituents in your districts. Thank you, Mr. President, for what you did. Thank you, and continue the good work of taking these drugs out of the traffic and putting them on the bottom of the ocean. My friends, this is Trump derangement syndrome. These people hate President Trump. I get that, but simply because you hate him, you should not wallow in that hate like you have and produce this kind of a product that stops the president from doing what he is supposed to do. This is shameful, and it should be defeated, and it's going to be defeated. Thank you, Mr. President.
President.
The senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, my colleague from Idaho's emotional speech notwithstanding, this is not about hating a president. It's about loving a Constitution. It's about loving a Constitution. The resolution that my colleague, Senator Schiff, has filed, which I gladly co-sponsor, does not say there cannot be military action against terrorists or cartels or drug traffickers. It just says that the United States should not be at war without a vote of Congress. The United States should not be at war against groups on a secret list prepared by one individual who is unwilling to share it with Congress and with the American public. My colleague said that we should put a resolution on the floor thanking the president. I have an idea for my Republican colleagues. Put a resolution on the floor declaring war against narco-traffickers. Why haven't they done that? That's what the Constitution says they should do. They are so strong in their belief that we should be at war with narco-traffickers. Why haven't they put a resolution before this body to say we should be at war with cartels and narco-traffickers? There are 2 reasons. They know it would fail, even in a Republican Senate. And second, they're afraid to vote on that resolution because they know their constituents are tired of wars and don't want Congress declaring more wars and treating serious law enforcement problems as challenges for the United States military. I strongly support the resolution that my colleague has filed. When President Trump announced in August that he might undertake this action, Senator Schiff and I conferred with other senators, and when the first strike was taken on the 4th of September, we wrote a letter to the President as the Article I branch charged with the power of declaring war, asking him a basic series of questions. Give us the evidence that these boats were actually carrying narcotics. Give us the legal rationale for striking them without coming to Congress. If you knew where they were enough to strike them, you could have interdicted them. Why did you choose to strike them and not interdict them? We hear that drugs are now at the bottom of the sea. If you interdict a ship and you seize drugs, you get evidence, you get individuals that you interrogate, and you build cases against the higher-ups in the narco-trafficking ring. When you destroy a boat, you don't get the evidence. You can't build the case. And we asked, why not interdict? Why strike rather than interdict? These were questions that Congress has a right to know the answer, and the American public has to know the right to answer, and we asked the President, give us answers to these questions in 7 days. Not unreasonable. We have yet to get answers to these questions. The administration believes it does not have to justify these actions to Congress. It does not have to tell us the evidence about the narcotics content of these boats. It does not have to give us a clear legal rationale. It does not have to explain the decision to strike rather than to interdict. When you ask basic questions and you're not given answers, you get suspicious that the answers are not forthcoming because there aren't good answers to the questions that we asked. We did have a follow-up hearing, the Armed Services Committee in the secure facility last week, and I can't really talk about what was said there, but I can sure talk about what wasn't said there. No answer to the question of why not interdict? It was asked over and over and over again, and aside.
If you want to get more involved, there are tables right here on your left-hand side. Right here, there's some tables to get you signed up and get you involved. And let's remember what happened on Saturday, October 4th, when the people of the neighborhood of back of the yards stood up, organized, and fought back against this violence.
Standing by. Copy, clear.
no one has been arrested for speech.
Well, what if you can't talk? And burning a flag is the way that you could show your detest.
Well, because you can write anything out you want. So, and then secondly, it isn't people on the right, that are saying they hate this country.
Well, so my mom had these like none of us here are saying we hate this country. Everyone else like this country.
I'm saying what you see, what's perceived online.
Because that's such a small little thing that's pushed by an algorithm.
I agree.
People who own the media and all the other. That's not everything.
I agree.
10-4. Yeah, I got to go do a guest now. Whoa. Shit.
The eyes of tomorrow are on you. Your actions will be known to history. Will you be remembered for the bravery of standing up to fascism, confidence, brutalizing your own country?
We are gathered here today not out of fear, but out of faith. Because what we are witnessing is not just political corruption, it is spiritual wickedness at high places. It is pure evil. They have turned ICE, the National Guard, and now the Texas Guard into instruments of intimidation, not protection. They have sent troops, yeah, you can boo with that. They have sent troops into our neighborhoods not to bring safety but to sow fear. And now we see mass federal agents patrolling our streets, faces covered, names hidden, snatching people off of sidewalks, disappearing people. And now the terrifying truth is you don't even know if you're being picked up by the Proud Boys or by federal agents. And that's how tyranny works. It hides behind a mask, behind a badge, and behind a Bible twisted for control. And we must name it for what it is. This is an authoritarian takeover wrapped in the language of law and order, backed by false religion that calls itself Christian nationalism. But listen, Christian nationalism is not of Christ. Christ did not cage children. Christ did not send soldiers into communities to terrorize people. Christ did not bless greed, guns, and dictators. This is not Christianity. This is idolatry of empire. And we are here to declare that we will resist fascism. We resist Christian nationalism. We resist authoritarian governments, and we will resist the militarization of our communities. The image of the black woman unarmed with a gun pointed to her head who experienced federal sanctioned gun violence. That image is this administration unmasked. It is a mirror showing how evil always needs a prey and how power always searches for someone to crush. But we are here today to say no more prey, we won't be silenced, and we won't surrender. They may have weapons, but we have a movement. They may have guards, but we have the people, and they may have armies, but we have an army of resistance, an army of justice, and an army that won't back down. So we don't just resist policy, we resist principalities. We resist fear, we resist hatred, and we resist every every system that was sent to break us. And as we stand today, shoulder to shoulder, black and brown faith leaders and freedom fighters, we declare today that no National Guard can guard against the truth. No Texas Guard can silence the people, and no mass agent can erase our courage or our calling, because this battle does not belong to ICE or the empire. This battle belongs to the movement and to the people of Chicago and Illinois. So fist up with me. We ain't free till we all free. 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 All right, last thing, Chicago and across Illinois, we gotta turn up, because if we lay down now, we're gonna have to live with this mess for years and years afterwards. We have to continue to stand up, fight back, and resist this foolishness that we're seeing in this administration, and let them know we from Chicago and we don't back down like that.
Wow, thank you, Reverend. Thank you. The coalition against the Trump agenda is made up of over 80 organizations, community organizations, unions, immigrant rights organizations, black organizations, faith groups, women's rights organizations, and LGBTQ rights organizations. We're asking you, if you have not joined our coalition, now is the time to do so. So please, come to this table or come to the front during the march. I will get you signed up. And one of those organizations is Casa DuPage Workers Center, a Latino immigrant rights organization out in DuPage. Please help me welcome one of their members, Guadalupe Gonzalez.
¡Sí se puede! 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 En Estados Unidos se habla español. Gracias por su presencia. Yo soy parte de Immigrant Solidarity DuPage. Somos Casa DuPage y representamos la fuerza laboral de Illinois, desde el condado de DuPage hasta la ciudad de Chicago. And we are here to stay. We are here to stay. We are here to stay. Gracias por solidarizarse y marchar pacíficamente con nosotros. Demostremos que estamos unidos en la adversidad, que no tenemos miedo, que la comunidad inmigrante pertenece y es una parte muy importante de este país. Nuestro trabajo y espíritu luchador nos fortalece para defendernos. Ya perdimos uno de los nuestros, Silverio Villegas. Todos somos Silverio, todos somos Silverio, todos somos Silverio, todos somos Silverio, todos somos Silverio. Tenemos que luchar y dar la cara por los que no pueden hacerlo. Queremos a ICE fuera de nuestras comunidades, fuera las tropas, fuera ICE, fuera de National Guard of Illinois.